A young Ukrainian woman called Olla meets a French man called Pierre on a dating site for Eastern European women. She arrives in the blue concrete banlieue of Paris to live with Pierre and his geriatric mother as a carer and wife for hire. This short, subtle narrative by Ariane Labed explores Olla's sexuality primarily. She retreats from the gawky Pierre's advances, flaunts her flesh riotously in front of his mother, and solicits the young men of the banlieue. You're listening to MoobTube, where every week we review a movie on Mubi because it's never been done before. Owen, how did you find this vignette of transgressions and transactions?
I love this film, and I was kind of in two minds about. I don't think we should say too much because there's a definite forceful ending to this film, and I don't want to give that away because I don't want to ruin a surprise for anyone that's not seen it yet and might watch it off the back of this. So I think we should kind of have on a matter where we don't disclose the ending, but we can talk about everything up to that. This was excellent. I mean, for me, and I feel this is a film about female empowerment and the character Olla, who, in this situation where typically she would be kind of subservient, or is expected to be subservient in a quite weird situation. She's the kind of basically a foreign worker, kind of masquerading as a wife, sort of. And for me, there's that read on it. I'm kind of like losing my thread through it a little bit because this is really a really subtle kind of character play. So much of this film doesn't take place vocally. There's very little dialogue in this film. It's really all about how Olla comports herself and behaves and performs in a series of like kind of repetitive little vignettes. There's sex scenes, there's dancing scenes, there's dinner scenes, and they're kind of all various repetitions. And in each version, she gains more power and sometimes loses some power and control to Pierre. Did you? So you think this was a dating website? Because it kind of implied that it was like, I assumed it was like a sort of mail order bride situation.
Yeah, so that's just what it says on the Mubi website, but actually the setup for the film is largely kind of not included in the film. It goes straight into her arriving in Paris. So yes, it's perfectly fair enough for you to not know that stuff, because in a way it's good to not.
Yeah.
I just read the copy on the Mubi website, but
it's interesting because No, go on.
No, go on.
I have nothing to say.
All right,
like this film, like Pierre.
It's very subtle. I thought about Chantal Akerman quite frequently during this, partly because of the abruptness, not the abruptness, but the sharp violence of the ending. I don't think that's giving much away. The sort of the balance between moments that were quite rough and moments that were quite tender. There was a sort of moments that moments where that were kind of erotic and exciting, cut very clearly in with moments of discomfort. There's an amazing scene where the older woman, the mother, who seems to be completely past it in her mental faculties, or just not choosing not to say anything at all,
choosing not to be present, which I think might be closer to the truth actually.
Yeah, she's being washed by Olla and Pierre in the bath. I think that comes straight after like a sort of sexual scene. It's immensely. There's lots of stuff in there about trauma. It's quite interesting that this, Pierre's advances. He touches her leg when she's napping, and he sort of asks her to dance for him, and he's a bit of a loser, and it's kind of
he's definitely a loser. Because the scene where he touches her leg, she's sleeping.
There's something really.
And it's quite there's quite an aggressive section, like an aggressiveness and possessiveness to his sexual advances. He clearly doesn't understand. He has no real ability to connect with Olla as a person. He wants to use her as a kind of, he's happy to use her as a cleaner, and implies that he wants her to cook for him and to be a sexual vessel, a sexual object for him. And in lots of ways, Olla denies him those things, and he has to seize them because there is I say he has, and not he has to, but there is a scene where he rapes her. And it's a really violent, shocking film because it goes from a moment where they actually do connect and they're kind of laughing, and he seizes on that as an opportunity to take advantage of her physically. Even though it's a film about her empowerment and her control, it's still very much a world authored by Pierre, who's this weird loser, who lives in this squeaky clean little house in Paris with his mother, and clearly has sort of nothing going on in his life. For me, the bit that I found really interesting was at the beginning. She's learning French, actually, because we see her practicing her French when she's cleaning the house. There's a moment where, during their very first conversation over the kitchen table, she kind of pops some stuff into like Google Translate and uses it to communicate with him.
That's
and then
very
he
nice
doesn't.
scene.
Yeah, but then he never returns that. He just talks at her in French from then on. It's because in
He's
this
just a
world,
colonial French dude, isn't he?
yeah, and he's got the technology to kind of talk to her in Ukrainian, to use a phone or whatever, but he chooses not to, so he just talks at her in French, and she obviously just nods along. It's like, I have no fucking idea what you're saying, fine. So she can kind of insulate herself and protect herself behind a kind of ignorance of language, which is kind of interesting. Yeah.
I liked that Pierre wasn't vilified. I like that even when he commits acts of violence, he's basically portrayed as pitiable and pathetic.
Yeah. For sure.
That sort of rang true. And also, the other one I thought about was Fear Eats the Soul by Fassbinder, which is another sort of guest worker kind of narrative, which, dealing with quite a sort of contentious, a topic that's quite contentious politically in quite a plain way, with where the sort of the decor, in both films and in Ackerman's work, the decor kind of does a lot of the talking.
Very domestic. They happen in very closed, small domestic spaces, kitchens, living rooms, stairwells. This is what happens in both of these films. I actually, Ariane Labed is Yorgos Lanthimos' wife, interestingly.
Yes. Yeah, I didn't know how to approach that
because I didn't want to talk about Ariane Labed through the lens of Yorgos Lanthimos.
You have to say me to get this film.
yeah. But I think it's interesting because they both share a similar but different aesthetic. Like this kind of reminded me of early Yorgos Lanthimos, but it has a social and political edge, which his films never have.
It's politically much more interesting than his work.
Yeah, his works. I don't like his recent films. Like From the Lobster onwards, they're just a bit shit, really, and kind of parodies themselves. But before that, like Attenborough and whatever, and Alps.
Dogtooth is actually really interesting politically. Yeah,
I think Dogtooth is probably the most interesting, and this has got real similarities to Dogtooth. These kind of like deadpan scenes that are played with this real deadpan energy in these kind of really spick and span clean domestic places. In that it's games of hurt, and here it's like when she takes most of her clothes off and dances in front of the mum, which is actually a really great scene. It's not even
amazing.
It's not presented as
kind of confusing but beautiful.
Really confusing but really elegant and beautiful. I guess that's how you talk about it through it. If we have to mention Yorgos Lanthimos, this is just kind of bare. Really, even though it shares some similarity of aesthetic and acting style, I guess. Just the deadpanness of it. Yeah, what else can we say?
I don't know. I think it's 27 minutes and it's really well paced as well. I'm very critical of short films. Most of the short films I've seen, narrative short films that attempt to kind of fit a narrative into that sort of time span, end up rushing things or cramming too much emotional weight into too small a package. But this I thought, just with the way it used repetition, the motifs, the kind of routines, things that happen several times but are different each time. The kind of the uniformity of texture I think helps a lot with that. Yeah, as someone who's like
Yeah.
currently attempting to make short films, I found this really instructive and really encouraging, just as a way that the format can have a big impact in a small
And it
period
could
of
be
time.
really exciting with sparse resources and very kind of clinical, sparse scene, like scenography and stuff. I was actually going to think, like, it really reminded me of a trilogy of short films by Yanni Warnock.
Oh, I haven't heard of that.
They're really good. I'll send you later. We can put the link, in the episode description. It's called the Despair trilogy, which are all three films with different characters that kind of depict like kind of absurd domestic scenes. He's an Australian filmmaker, and so they're all set in Australia, and they're all quite kind of grim like this, but darkly funny. And it's kind of like I'll put the description there because it reminded me. It's got a similar, like these really self-contained little narratives in the short form that are just really evocative and quite, explosive in lots of ways. So that's my tuppence on that. That's kind of what I have to say about it, because I don't want to run over, because we're supposed to be.
Yeah, no, I think that there's a sort of ratio, isn't there? I think sort of we can't really do a podcast about a film that's more than half the length of the film.
No.
I just came up with that now, but it is, it would be crazy to talk for 45 minutes about a 27-minute film. Although I'm sure we could. We do chat.
Yeah.
But yes, watch Olla. It's great.
Cool. The end.